Well, hi guys, welcome to a very special webinar today where we're going to be previewing the upcoming Vista free R3 release. We'll just wait for a few more people to join us in today's webinar. They're just coming online. If you haven't joined us for one of these webinars before, the way it works is I'm going to host the webinar and take you through the features and changes. And with me on the webinar is also Ben Coleman. So if you've got any questions, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll try and answer those as we go, or perhaps at the end we'll do a little bit of a Q&A session on any questions that you might have about what you've seen or questions in general about the changes. So before we get into it, to celebrate, I'd just like to let you know that throughout September and October, Vista by Chroma-Q are going to be running a special deal on dongle sales and dongle upgrades. And that special is 40% off the cost of either a new dongle or additional channels that you might like to purchase. And if you already have a Vista dongle, on top of that, what we'll also do is give you the full credit for that dongle at the standard price. So it's a hell of a deal. We'll be announcing more details on that next week, and contact your local dealer or representative for pricing on that. So we just have a few more people just joining the webinar. So R3, it's got over 200 changes and fixes and improvements and new features in it. So by no means is today taking you through all of those. You'll be able to check out the release notes for that. I've just picked out some of my personal favorites that I'm going to be taking you through today. It's also important to mention that we're not going straight to a public release of software. We will be going to a public beta stage first, just to cast our net that little bit wider and check it out on different computers and operating systems. And we should be posting that on our forum later today as well. So you'll be able to check this out for yourselves very shortly. And then just after that, once we're happy with all the testing there, we'll then move into a full public release. So with that, let's get straight to it and take you through some of the features and changes. I'm going to talk about the fixture chooser to begin with and some of the changes that we've made there. The first one, if I just zoom in, is the fixtures now have a element halo of their programmed color. So if you can see these fixtures here, these don't have intensity, they're at 0%, but you can see the color that they're in here. So it's really nice to see at a visual glance. These ones have intensity, these ones don't. If I just progress through this queue as well, it's also really handy because these fixtures don't have intensity, but because the halo is dynamically changing, it's really clear to see if you've still got effects running or anything like that. This feature actually supersedes a previous feature that we had in one of the view menus called false intensity. That's been removed because we feel that this is a much better way of representing that. On top of that, there's also another little indication in the fixtures, and it's basically these little polka dots that you can see that make it almost look like a poker chip. When you see these dots, it means that there's a gobo present in that fixture. You can see that in these fixtures here, there is 0 intensity. So just at a glance at the fixture chooser, you know that these fixtures here actually contain a gobo, of course, which you can see in the normal way when you give that some intensity. So that's element halo and also the polka dot to note a gobo's in there. Another feature that we've added to the fixture chooser, if I change layout to one of my other views, such as the plan view, is we give you the ability to duplicate icons. So this is useful if you've got a single dimmer channel, for example, that's hard patched or hardwired to multiple fixtures in your stage. So we can select a fixture, for example, this blue one just here. If I just show you my WYSIWYG just here, if I turn this one on, so you can see this single dimmer channel here in my WYSIWYG design is actually to 2 fixtures. So what I can do now is I can right click this and come down to duplicate icon, and I would then get, as you would expect, a duplicate icon that you can move around. You can keep adding these. You don't have to just stop at 2. You can just keep duplicating it and you can add as many as you like. Of course, now whichever one you click, you're controlling all of them. So it doesn't matter if you click the left one or the right one, you're controlling all of these together. If you want to remove a duplicate, you just right click the one that you want to remove and press remove duplicated icon. So the workflow is you would just repeat this process for all the different fixtures in your show. Just grab this one here and put this over here. So you kind of get the idea of what can happen with these. We've also let you do it with group icons, should you wish. So if you want to duplicate a group icon within the space and maybe give you touchscreen control over that left and right, you can set this up however you like. So that's duplicating icons. Small details, but it does make a difference. The layout tabs have also been increased a little size-wise. They're also a little bit clearer to read. So again, if you're working with touchscreens, these are much easier to hit. Another feature, if you point to and hover over a fixture, we actually show you where that fixture is patched in the little tooltip. So you can see that it's patched at universe 2 address 105. So that can be really handy if you just want to find where a fixture is patched. You can just point to it. Moving on from this, if you right click it, you can also press find in patch table. So when you click this, the screen will change to the patch view and it will show you exactly where that fixture is. Let's jump back to the fixture chooser for now. Another useful navigational tool in the Fixture chooser is if you hold down the Alt key or the middle mouse button, so the scroll button, if you just watch my pointer, it will change to a little hand. So then when you click and drag, you actually get to move these around. So you don't have to grab the horizontal or vertical lines. You can just literally hold Alt and move this around. So that's a really nice way of navigating the space. A small detail, but again, it does really help you for clarity. With the intensity readout in the actual icon, if you then choose to rotate an icon, this intensity will still remain the right way up. So it's always clear to see. Previously, that would actually rotate with the fixture. So that's quite nice. Coming on to some changes in the user interface itself, you might notice straight away that the function key or the menu bar used to be at the top. Now by default will live at the bottom of the screen. You can see that you can change it should you wish to put it back at the top. It takes a little bit of getting used to the first time you try this out for yourselves, but it is actually much better, particularly for touchscreen users, because if you're touching some of these buttons, your hand's not covering up the screen. So it is actually very comfortable to have this down at the bottom. Once with the actual feature browser itself, again, we've made some improvements to physical size of the tabs. You'll notice that these tabs are bigger and clearer. We've also changed the way the intensity control buttons are. We've removed some and we've added some extra ones. So you can see, for example, 0, 50, and 100%, much bigger and more touch friendly. We've removed the left and right arrows, but you can still slide that around or hit some of these toggles. So it's more accurate in this sense. We've also added some minus and plus increments. By default, this is 5%, so it's increasing up or down in this set increment. But this is actually a user preference, so you can change this to suit your own style. And to do that, we go to File, User Preferences, and we come into the Editing tab, and this is called Intensity Increment Amount. So if I want this to go by 10% instead of 5, just change the number, apply the setting, and now you can see we can up and down 10% just here. Another useful one is we've added tilt only and pan only sliders to the all feature palette. Previously, this was only found in the specific position feature, but now it's also in the main tab as well. So that's really handy. Another useful thing that we've done in the features is now every time you click the beam tab, by default, the default page is the focus tab. Previously, it was the frame tab. So now it's always going to come into the actual focus tab for zoom and iris control and that type of stuff. Another thing that we've added to the feature browsers, let me just make a new queue list just here, and we'll just turn these on in a color. Let's say, for example, in Q2, you want to change this to a release event. What you'd have to do in R2 is you'd have to program a dummy event, select them, and right-click and press Convert to Release Event. Whereas in R3, what we can do, if I just delete this and select the fixtures, in each of the feature drop-downs, we'll find a release event. So all we have to do now is just press Release, and that will program a release event for those fixtures in there. So we no longer have to create that dummy event and do all of that stuff with these guys. On the color handling, certainly with LED fixtures, we've added more understanding to Vista's logic and how it understands how to work with certain manufacturers' naming of colors. And I can demonstrate that in here. For example, this is an elation fuse profile, which has the colors mint green. Some other fixtures might call this lime or something similar. If I just turn this on, you can see that now mint green is changing with the color mix. In R2, this wouldn't do anything because we had no previous understanding of mint green. And we've done this for all of the manufacturers of LED chips that we currently know out there on the market. Another example would be the Robe DL7 series that has Congo blues and light greens, or even some of the newer ETC fixtures that have colors such as deep red and all of these type of colors. The summary is that you should be getting much better control out of your LED fixtures that are using slightly unconventional namings, and that's all now part of the generic model, filtering down with the algorithms to the color mix. So you'll just notice that change happen based on just simply loading in R3. So that's really good. Another UI change that we've made is the 6 window used to be the output view. We've actually removed that, and we've given you a user configurable window. So you can see this just down here. And basically this acts as the same as the external windows do in release 2. So you can see here I've configured 4 fixture choosers, but you can still see all of the components down the side. So you can just keep adding these components and configuring them around. So you can have this flexibility within a single screen setup. You don't have to have multiple. If I just load a snapshot, you can see here is a user interface that I've configured before. So just simply by changing from the fixture chooser view to the user configurable window, you can change between these two different programming or operational styles without the need for snapshots or anything like that. For the components themselves, we also give you the ability to change the border color, and you can see that on some of these that I've done here. So to change the border color, all you need to do is right-click on the component and come down to change border color. And then you get to choose a border color for that particular component. So it just lets you customize to suit your own preference the screen, because previously all of the colors were, the cyan colors or the yellow or the greens. So you can personalize that a little bit more. If I jump into the playback screen and just click on one of my queue lists just here, we also give you the ability to increase the font size or decrease the font size by these menu items or the shortcut on the keyboard, Control and plus and Control and minus. So if I do Control and plus, you can see that these will get bigger because we have had a few requests that people would like to make this section a little bit easier to read. So you can increase that until you can see it or feel more comfortable with that screen. In this first release of software, this setting isn't saved with the show file, but I'm sure we'll get to that point sometime soon. Another long-standing request that we've implemented, if we lock the console. I'm not sure what it's going to do on the webinar, but let's find out. We can put in the password as before, but this time we can see a custom lock screen on all of your screens that you have on your setup. This is the default image that you will see. But if you want to create your own image of whatever may be, that's done from the User Preferences tab, and it's in the first tab, General. Just under Auto Show Load, you can see Lock Screen Image, and you can browse for your own one if you want to. So that pretty much covers the highlights from the user interface. I'm just going to talk about a few changes that we made in the patch screen. So if we jump over there, we can label the universe tabs at the top. To do that, we right click in an empty space and come down to label universe. So this is the new action here. So I can call this my LED wash, and you'll see that name in the tab up here, and you can just obviously keep going. So let's right click, label the universe, spots, beams, and so on. So this is helpful just for show organization. Over in the Connect Universes window, another feature that we've added is a new column, and it's called Output Enabled. And this is for Ethernet protocol, so primarily ArtNet, streaming ACN, and Pathport. And you can toggle these on and off, so you're actually turning off the data output. So if I untick one of these, it turns off the ArtNet output. It's not just a single universe, it's the entire protocol, so you can see all of them went off. But my streaming ACM is still active there. So this is useful if maybe you're touring Vista and you want to connect to a festival's lighting network, configure all of your nodes and outputs, but don't actually output any data until it's your turn for that band to actually start playing. In terms of DMX, so actual physical consoles, you can't toggle them off. They're always going to be going out there. So this is just for Ethernet-based protocols. If we take a look at the DMX view, we've just changed how this appears visually. It's a little bit clearer as to what's happening. So we see the channel number to the side in yellow, and then the actual bit value in white and gray if it's actually got a value underneath. So that's a little bit clearer. And one of the last things in the patch, if we go to the Transforms tab, we've now got invert pan and invert tilt in addition to the fixture. So invert pan and tilt here, this is the normal fixture, invert pan and tilt. The invert pan and tilt encoders is just for your own user preference. If you want to just invert how the actual console encoders are feeling for you without necessarily inverting the fixture, then that's how that can be achieved down here. Throughout the software, we have actually made quite a lot of name changes just to make things a little bit clearer or make a little bit more sense to some people. The first of those is strike and douse, so lamp on and lamp off. They're now called lamp on and lamp off. They're still found in the exact same places, but they're now called lamp on and lamp off. Check the release notes for all of the other things that we've changed the naming of, but probably two more to note in this webinar is the first one is file and networking has now been renamed file and tracking backup, because that's actually what it was. It wasn't anything to do with the networking of Vista at all. And finally, the only other one I'm probably going to mention in this webinar is the open soft key action. So the open soft key action is of course an edit queue list. So it now says edit, not open, but of course it still actually does open that queue list for editing. So that's that. So the next thing that I'd like to talk about, it's actually quite a significant change to the way it works, is we have what we call now a default queue list. And you can see this down here in the command line. So the default queue list is the queue list that you're always going to be storing to by default. And it's also the place that all of the command line actions are going to target by default, unless you explicitly say otherwise. So at the moment, I've got song 1, which is my list 1 down here. So what the command line prefix will show you is the default queue list, and if the queue is actually playing, it will show you the currently playing queue as well. So if I press play, we're now in Q2. So if I wanted to change something such as label, if I just hit label in here, this actually starts flashing and tells you what you're going to change. But it's going to be labeling Q2 because that's the queue that you're currently playing. So we can just give us a new name, for example, down here. So let me just program, let's say, a green queue. If I press store, you can see that it wants to store to the end of the default queue list, and that's always a default action now. So it's really, you know exactly what it's going to do. So here it is. Here's my new queue. We can call this green. I'll just do another one. Let's call it cyan. Store. Again, it stores to the end of the default queue list. Cyan. Just here. Now let's say I want to store something else. Let's take these blinders, for example. I'm just going to store list. Let's go for 100, just because I know that's free. So I'm now storing these selected fixtures to my list 100 because I've explicitly told it to store to this location, so that's okay. But now, if I was to do the store again and do something else, for example, let's go pink and press store, it's no longer storing to list 100, it's come back to the default queue list because that's still selected down here. To change the queue list or the default queue list, we're still using the select buttons. So we select on the actual playbacks here. So if I select list 6, you can now see in the bottom list 6 is a default queue list, or list 5, or any of this. So pressing the select button is one way to change the default queue list. You can also use the command line itself. So if I do list 5, enter, that selects this queue list. A couple of other ways that you could do this is in the quick picker, we've got queue lists. You should be able to right click and press set default queue list just here. So now my list number 2 is the default list. And there's also a new button in the editor as well. So if we take a look at one of these queue lists, let's take a look at list 1, is we have, let's do another example as well. Let's edit list 8 and 9. So from here we have this select button. This selects it as the default queue list. If I click into this tab, I can press this select here, and this selects this as a default queue list. You'll also see the little tab icon changing to become green as well, which also shows you that this is the default queue list. When you select a queue list, if the tab's open, you will also be placed in that view. So, for example, if I do list 9 on my command line and enter, I'm going to be taken to that editor queue list straight away. Another thing that happens is when you close a queue list tab, so let's just hit the close on list 9, you will always return to the live tab. You won't go to the next tab or anything like that. So once you close a list, you always return to the live tab. So again, it's really predictable on what's going to happen when you're closing stuff. You know that's going to happen. So when we're in the live tab, all of the store defaults and the command line actions are going to be going to the default queue list. When we click into an editor tab, such as queue list 8 white bump, you'll see this change to then the editor queue list. This is the queue list that we're editing in now. And when we're in an editor queue list, of course, at this point in time, any command line actions or anything like that will affect the editor queue list, the one that we're working in. As soon as we come out of an editor queue list, we jump back to the default queue list and we're working from there. Before I move on, Ben, are there any questions about that in the chat? Because I guess that's one of the most critical things to understand from moving from R2 to R3 is the way this behavior works.
No questions about that specifically.
Mm-hmm. Great. So if I just jump into my virtual console view. I'm going to come into my playback view here. So this is the playback action. And this again is working on the selected default queue list. So if I press select on, let me just change page and select list 3. The super playback controls in the playback mode are now controlling list 3. If I select a different queue list, we're following that. So basically all you need to understand is that when this super playback is unlocked, you're always going to be controlling the selected default queue list. If I just jump back to IPCG mode, in R2, what would happen in IPCG mode is the super playback transport controls wouldn't do anything until you change to the playback mode. Whereas in R3, they continue to play the selected list. So right now I'm on list 3. If I'm pressing my main play button, you can see I'm affecting list 3. If I change my selected list, I'm playing this list. So in other words, the transport controls remain available even when you're in IPCG mode to adjust those features on there. For the purpose of the webinar, that's all I'm going to talk about for the transport controls here today. Let's program another queue list very quickly. So let's program these here. We'll put them in the color red and the singer. And in this one, I'll also put them in the red and this singer. So I've actually programmed duplicate events here. In terms of tracking, in this second queue, these events don't need to be here. In R3, what happens when you unblock a queue? So let's just right click and press unblock queue. What happens is even if the queue's not blocked to begin with, any events that don't need to be in this queue are automatically removed. So essentially, if you unblock a queue that's not blocked, it acts as a remove redundant events for this single queue, not the entire queue list. So this could be a useful tool just to kind of help clean up your programming as you go on a queue by queue basis. So that's unblocking an unblocked queue. Some of the other things that we've added just in the timeline is it's actually much clearer. We put a bigger space in between the queues, so it's actually easier to see where your queues are happening and what separates them in the timeline. And there's actually quite a lot of changes like that throughout R3 that we're not going to go into in this, but you will notice it when you try it out for yourselves. I'm just going to add a few more queues in just here. We've added some more keyboard shortcuts as well to help you navigate playback just using a keyboard. The first of those is Control or Command on a Mac and the left and right arrow keys on the keyboard. So if I hold this down now and go left, what you'll see is the playback actually skips back. And if I press to the right, it will skip forward. Previously in R2, what would happen is it would just be the selection of the cues that's changing, not the actual playback. So we've changed that to playback so we can skip forwards, skip backwards. Of course, we can still play with the spacebar and all of those keyboard shortcuts remain. The other one is shift and left arrow and right arrow. Doing this will jump to the end of the list. So this is the right arrow, or if I hold shift and use the left arrow key, it will go to the first queue. So again, just the same sort of transport controls that you're used to seeing on consoles with super playback. It's effectively these keys just here that we're able to access through the keyboard. So this next little bit, I'm going to talk about some new queue list changes to the queue list properties. So let's take a look at that. And I'm going to show you this using a visualizer just here. So let's open up the queue list properties of list 2. We've named some of theta intensity time. This used to be called submaster in the manual. So manual used to be called submaster, and programmed is still what you've actually programmed in the queue itself. So we have changed that. Another change that we made here is that when you're flicking between these two options of manual and programmed, you may have seen just then that as soon as I clicked manual, we also automatically changed the fader autoplay option for you. And this is to make the flash behavior more consistent. And it can actually speed up programming because you don't have to do it yourself and all of that stuff. So in this case here, what we should see is that, so with manual, let me just pull this fader down. And again, we can still flash this. So with manual, what's happening is it's the intensity snapping in, but all of the features, intensity, sorry, position color is actually following the Q time to fade up into its look just here. Going back to that, if I just show you another example, in the timing tab, another feature is that we have flash attack, which is fade up, flash dwell, which is a hold, and flash decay times. So you can type a numeric number in these boxes, or you can tick the live timing box if you also want to use the dynamic live timing that you may have set. So for example here, if I type, let's try 1 second, then I'll do a 0.5 second hold, and then we'll do a 3 second decay. What we should see here when we play this is if I hold it, we'll get this action going on just here. So you can see the hold when you're holding it. Let me just bring that back in. Just increase this a little bit. And just change the setting just here. We can see that bumping in and out just here. So that's a flash attack and decay time. We can just set that per queue list, which is quite nice. Let's see, let me show you another list that we've got going on here. So you can see the attack and decay working on this list. So I'm just doing a really quick tap, but you can see that it still attacks and decays in my set time. So this is just a normal flash that we're seeing here, just always flashing the first queue. Let's just open the properties of this list. Another property that I want to explain is the flash autoplay. What happens with this when we turn this on to autoplay, as soon as the decay finishes its cycle, it will play the next queue, which in this case is a 2-second change. So if I hit flash, what happens is the first bit will flash, but now you can see it's automatically progressed to the next queue. So now I can press flash again and it's the middle, and then it will be the right. So all I'm doing now potentially is just flashing a single button, but the queue list automatically enhancing for me using those flash attack, dwell, and decay times. And you can see that visually in the left LCD here as well, just here from there. Another button action that we made here in the virtual console view is a button action called play release. You might also be referred to this as a temp play button. You can see I've assigned this to this button just here. So it's almost like a flash, but it's actually playing and releasing the queue list. So if I just push the fader up and just show you this. So if I hold it, it's going to play the queue list, and it's going to keep playing it until you let go. So if you let go, it will then release that queue list in the release time of the queue list as normal in there. So that can be handy if you want all features, not just intensity, to follow a certain queue time or release time in there. If I just come back to my other queue list and just put this fade up a little bit, so we can still flash it. So you can see here that we're going up intensity. You can just about see that just here. I'll try and make that a little bit clearer for you using a fixture chooser. Let's just have a quick look. If I just show you these fixtures just here. Okay, so if you watch the intensity, you should see this. So we can we can flash these up a little bit. I'm just going to turn off the flash autoplay for a second, just so we can see it's a little bit clearer. So we're flashing up. You can see I'm flashing up from 33% to 100%. So this is normal flash behavior. But another new button action is also called Smart Flash, which you'll find in the list somewhere up here. So here it is, Smart Flash. Let's just drag this into a button the same as before. What Smart Flash does is if the fader is less than 95%, you will still flash up. You can see that flashing up. But if the fader is above 95%, so at full, this action will invert. So when you press it now, this will be a flash out. And if I let go, of course, it will come back into my set level. When we're using Smart Flash, it also inverts any attack or decay times that you may have set. So essentially, the attack time is always the same if you're working up or working down. So that's some nice features in here. A new fader action that we have is chase crossfade percentage. I'm not going to demonstrate that, but essentially if you're using chasers and you want to adjust the amount of crossfade percentage, you can now do that on a fader just by dragging and dropping it. Oh wow, I actually forgot this. We've actually added even more playback button actions, which I'm going to demo to you over here on this effect. So here's an effect that I programmed. It's using an effects master, which I've assigned up here on some buttons. And the new button actions are effects master button actions. We have double rate, half rate, quadruple rate, and zero rate as well. We have a button where you press it and it just doubles it or quadruples it and it holds that, or it can be temporary. A temporary is basically like a flash. If you hold it down and you let go, it's always going to return back to the tapped rate at the effects master. And I can demonstrate that here now. So this is my tap tempo, the same as we've had it in release 2. So this is using a rate of 107. I've got this times 2 button here, which is a temp times 2. So if I hold it down like a flash, we've doubled that to 214. Or I could demonstrate it perhaps a little bit clearer with a temporary times 4. So we go all the way up to 427 with this. So as soon as you let go of this button, it's going to return to the tapped rate from here. This times 2 is just the normal double rate. It's not temporary. So if you press it, it doubles the rate. If you press it again, it doubles the rate again, and it just doubles the rate again. So this can be useful if you're using like a song's building. It can build, you can just press times 2, and then maybe there might be a slight pause, so you can do a temp 0 rate, and then as soon as the track comes back into its normal tempo again, you can just press that reset rate, and you will have automatically reset to that tempoed beat. So these are really useful and some of my favorite things with effects masters in R3. So similarly with temporary play release, and flashes, we've also added you some new playback options in quick pickers as well. So let me just run a snapshot for a second. Okay, so these are cue lists, the same as before, but the new settings are in the actual playback click behavior. So the new settings here are set default cue list, which is another way of setting the default cue list, play, which we had in R2, but the main new ones here are play and release, so that temp action, or flash, which behaves in the same way as a console flash action here as well. So if I just show you my visualizer again, hopefully we can see this. Let's just make this a little bit smaller. I'm just going to play list 1 as well. So here's list 1. So we've got my flashes. I've got an odd mole list, which we can see just here that we can click. I'm just going to go and play these, because if you are playing them, you still need to make sure that the faders have actually got the right levels, so you can see these happening here. But essentially now, I can just click on this, click on these ones, and we should see these flashing if you actually set the correct properties, such as flash. You can see these flashing. So I'm just doing a single click, and it's using the attack and decay time set in these lists. On my magic dots, I'm just having these snapping in and out. There's no attack or decay time on this list. So that's obviously Flash. And then the play release, much the same as I demonstrated in the actual virtual console. But the main thing here is you've just got more flexibility. If you want to have big touchscreen buttons and color them and have some more playback options, then you can achieve that by using these settings. The actual setting itself is per quick picker page. So for example, you can see here, I've just made some extra pages and set the setting. So the setting is per page, not by per quick picker necessarily. Onto the effects engine. Let me just show you some new things in the effects engine. Let's take a look at list 10. Cool. This is the base look. I'm just going to create a new queue and we'll make this 0 seconds. And we'll just head over to my matrix just here and let's create a new effect. So let's press new effect. We'll just do intensity wave for the purpose of this demonstration. And we'll just make this a little bit square. We'll change the overlap down a little bit and we'll make it a diamond just here. So these are obviously the same setting as before. The new setting that I want to show you is called cycles or X-shot effect. So the default is infinite. This effect will just keep looping around infinitely. But you can set how many times you want this effect to run if you like. So for example, 2, if we just step back and now press play on Q2, what we see is that will run once, twice, and then stop. So you can really be specific about what you want to achieve when running an effect cycle. So once or twice, and it will just stop and do its thing. So that's cycles. It's found in the actual intensity tab or the primary feature of it, just here. A new button in the effects engine as well is called delete effect in addition to stop effect. So delete will actually remove the effect from the programming, whereas stopping before just put the stop effect command. I'm not going to demonstrate it, it is pretty self-explanatory, but it's important to mention that deleting the effect will actually delete the source queue, which could be in a previous queue to the one that you're currently editing. Another feature in the effects window, if I just play a different list, let's play list 4. So in here we have all these different effects running. If we click one of these effects, you can see that when you click it, the fixture chooser will actually preview the selection and the current run order of that effect. So if I just click again, you can see it just briefly shows me before returning to my currently selected fixtures in here as well. If I head back to an editor queue list, I'm just going to briefly show you some new inserted commands. So let's go to Tools and Insert Command. So some of the new actions in here is we have load super playbacks, and then we can select a list. So it loads super playback. A new target, which is common throughout all actions, is called this queue list. So this is useful if you're duplicating queue list. You don't have to go in and edit the target to be a certain number. You can just say this queue list, and Vista will automatically work out which one you mean. So load super playbacks. Let's have a look. So this queue list. Well, what does that do? Essentially, as soon as you hit play and you see that, it will load this queue list into the super playback. So this could just save you a lot of time of having to create console snapshots just simply to load in a queue list into the master queue list section. So that helps you out and saves you quite a bit of time there. The other one is set default queue list, which is still pressing that select button. So you can select this queue list. Why do we put that in here? Well, this is mainly to do with the playback window. If we just insert this, and again, just play this queue, If in the playback window you're using the setting to follow on select, just here, that means that as soon as you play a certain cue list, it's automatically going to be selecting it, setting as a default, so you know it's in here. You don't have to go and press the select button yourself. So it's just all about kind of organizing yourself and making sure you're seeing the information that you want to see when you're following a show playback. Let's have a look at some more in here. I'm sure I missed some. Jump in lifetime. This is one of the latest additions that we've added. Previously, what would happen when you're jumping to a certain queue list is that it would use the queue's program time. You couldn't change that. Whereas what jump in lifetime does, it's pretty obvious, is that when you jump to this queue, it's not going to use the queue's program time, it's going to use lifetime. So this is certainly useful if you're working in those sort of live busking situations. So I'm just looking at the clock. We're pretty much heading towards the end of the webinar. I'm just going to list off some of the other things that we've changed in it. MP3 tracks in R3 don't have to be encoded at a certain bitrate. Previously, they had to be really specific, whereas now you can load in any MP3 sample rate in there. We also have a new carry-along factor library, so hundreds of new fixtures have been added. For the Mac users, we also now officially support Catalina, and we've made quite a lot of changes to the Mac OS installer. Namely, there's no need to install the dongle driver manually. This is checked and installed automatically for you as soon as you run that installer. And the same thing happens for the UD512 as well. So that's a much welcome change there. Under the hood, there's also, of course, lots of bug fixes and improvements. And most notably, we've changed the USB handling throughout. So connections by USB is much improved, and you may also see an improvement in latency as well when using console, certainly the EX and MV. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we should be hosting this as a public beta at some point today. We'll be doing that over on our user forum. So if you haven't signed up, head over there, create yourself an account, and you should be able to check this out for yourself. On top of that, we'll also be releasing a brand new manual, which is comprehensive for Vista free. So not just release free, but the entire software features as well, with all of the new stuff that we've added over the years as well. Excellent. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll pretty much wrap this up. If you do have any more direct questions, feel free to email us, vistasupport@chroma-q.com, and we will take it from there.